The Columbus Blue Jackets have been very busy this offseason, and we're not even at the draft yet. They've added 2 veteran defensemen. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets is here to talk about that and what's next for the Blue Jackets in a very critical offseason. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And we are now also available on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host, a co-host of Locked On Columbus Blue Jackets, Jay Forster. And Jay, your team has been very busy over the last week or so, adding a couple of veteran defensemen. Your thoughts on these 2 moves and maybe a little bit about the big picture of what this means for the team?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I just want to say that I was supposed to be on vacation this week. And then the Blue Jackets decided to do everything. So shout out to the Blue Jackets. I don't necessarily know that both of these moves needed to be made. After speaking to Rachel, Locked On Flyers, very, very smart person. We love Rachel. I feel a lot better about the Ivan Provorov trade than I did immediately after it happened. I think he's probably going to stabilize the blue line a little bit, which is kind of what this team needed. I don't know if they needed anything huge, but I think they needed stability. And then you add Damon Severson into that, who obviously was part of a sign and trade. He's here for the next 8 years. I don't know that I would have signed 29-year-old Damon Severson to an 8-year contract, but that's what you do in free agency. You know, people get paid, and that's essentially what this was. This was a free agent signing prior to the deadline, or prior to free agent frenzy. So I don't hate either of these moves. I think we gave up too much for Provorov. I think we signed Damon Severson for a little too long, but it's very clear to me what Jarmo Kekalainen thinks this team is going to be this year. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think kind of still remains to be seen a little bit. I feel like he's trying to push the rebuild a little faster than maybe it should. Whether that's, a feedback loop from Johnny Gaudreau signing last season and, trying to get the best out of his prime years. I mean, he turned 30 this upcoming season. So, he's obviously getting older, which again sounds really weird to say considering he's 29 years old. But so I wonder if that's a part of it. But it feels very much like Jarmo is like, okay, we're not doing a rebuild anymore. We are in win now mode, which I feel mixed. I have mixed reactions to that. I have mixed feelings about that. I think I'm fine with hurrying up the rebuild. I don't know that it should come at the cost of the future. So we'll see how it goes. But if the Blue Jackets are better defensively this season than last, then I'm more than okay with that. And I'm pretty sure if everyone stays healthy, they will be.
Talk to me about the role that each of these 2 new players are going to play on the defense.
Well, in my mind, this is the second pairing for the Blue Jackets. And so, your top 4 then becomes, in my mind, it should be Werenski and David Jiricek on the top pairing. Jiricek probably should be in the NHL full-time this season. And then Severson, Provorov on the second pairing. And that, I think, opens up a lot of freedom for this team in terms of who they put on the third pairing. I think a lot of the problems the Blue Jackets had on the blue line last season were that Werenski was hurt 13 games into the season. So everyone had to get bumped up a spot. And then Jake Bean got hurt like 3 games after that. He was done for the season. And then, everyone got bumped up a spot again. And Adam Bokus was out for a long time. Nick Blankenberg was out for long parts of the season. Everyone gets bumped up a spot. And so, by the time Vladislav Gavrikov gets traded to the Kings at the deadline, you've got Andrew Peeke and Eric Branson playing 27 minutes a night each. And that feels unideal. So I think by adding 2 guys like Provorov and Severson, both pretty durable. They don't get injured a lot. I'm just going to knock on wood because this team is cursed. I think that gives the Blue Jackets a chance to play guys like Eric Branson for way less minutes and have him be way more effective. Because a lot of the problems last season are, I think, or were born of players playing way too high in the lineup and playing way too many minutes. So now that you've got a solid second pair, and Severson could even play on the first pair, but to my mind, the top four for this team should be Werenski, Jiricek, Severson, Provorov. It's a pretty solid top four, in my opinion.
Absolutely, no question about that. So, all right, the blue line seems to be stabilized. We haven't even hit the draft. We haven't even started officially free agency. Where do you think the Blue Jackets go from here?
Well, the draft is the big thing coming up, obviously. The Blue Jackets have the 3rd overall pick. They're going to pick a center. Whether that ends up, my money is on Leo Carlson, but I've heard whispers that the Ducks might be interested in him at 2nd, so that frees up Adam Fantilli to go 3rd. There's also Will Smith, who I wouldn't necessarily take 3rd overall, but is kind of in that tier of players that could be that franchise top line sentiment that the Blue Jackets haven't had basically ever. I would argue that their last true number 1 C was Pierre-Luc Dubois, and he was gone by the time he was 21. And then Ryan Johansson before that, and he was gone by the time he was 24, So they've never had a long-term franchise sentiment. And I think that's what they're going to pick up in the draft. Yamo, I don't think is done making trades. The Blue Jackets now have, I believe, 9 NHL-ready defensemen. So, do they move Adam Boquist and try and trade back into the first round? Do they trade Jake Bean? Do they trade Andrew Peeke? Do they try and get... there's a lot of chatter around someone like Kevin Hayes, who I believe has 2 years left on his contract. The Blue Jackets are trying to pick him up from the Flyers. They're arguing about salary retention right now. But, do you send one of your extra defensemen to Philadelphia in return for, 75% of Kevin Hayes' contract, or even less than that? So there's definitely going to be moves. I'm not sure what the moves are going to be, but I would be very surprised if Jarmo Kekalainen is done making trades. I think he really wants to pick up a middle 6 veteran center that can kind of hold the fort down until guys like whoever they draft this year, guys like Kent Johnson, guys like Cole Sillinger, are ready to be the effective NHL sentiment that I think we all believe they can be.
And what's the cap situation like for Columbus heading into this part of the offseason now?
It was looking pretty good. They have $5.8 million right now after picking up Severson and Provorov. Obviously, Philadelphia is retaining... part of a 3-way trade. 30% of Provorov's salary is being paid by LA for the next 2 seasons. So that helps. He was, I believe, a $6.5 million defenseman. Now he's 4.725, so that helps. The thing that worries me is, $5 million in cap space seems like a lot. Next season, they are going to have to pay. Kent Johnson's getting a new contract. Kirill Marchenko, who scored almost 30 goals in 60 games this season, is going to get a new contract. Cole Sillinger is up. Nick Blankenberg is up. There's a lot of contracts that need to be signed next summer. So that does worry me a little bit, but right now the cap situation, I think, is fine. I would expect, and again, if you move, Jake Bean's making 2.3, Boquist is making 2.6, Peeke is making 2.75. I would expect Jack Roslovic to get moved. He's making $4 million, so they have some flexibility with the cap. I'm not worried about it right now. Ask me again this time next year about how I feel about the cap, because the next summer I think is going to be a big one. A lot of guys coming off their ALCs.
Well, it should be an interesting ride, no question about that. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find me at _Jacob Forster, JAKOB FORSTER. You can find my new co-host Hayden over at HaydenH971 on Twitter. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter, and also wherever you get Locked On NHL. We're on every podcast app of choice. We are on Sirius XM, the radio app, and of course you can find us over on YouTube as well.
All right. Jay, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Today's episode is brought to you by a product I literally use every day, AG1 by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're like me, you want to be healthy and eat well, but it's easier said than done. Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all these things. And look, AG1 costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, but it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.